Hey everybody, Matt Colville here. We are more than halfway through this Kickstarter. We've got, I think, 10 or 11 days left. March 11th is when it all wraps up. And I want to make sure that we spend the rest of the campaign talking about the rules, the stuff you're going to get in the book. We may actually do an update about the campaign I'm going to be running. That depends on what folks want to hear about. Using these rules, you can not only attract blacksmiths and scribes that can make magic items for you, you can attract a unit of elite heavy cavalry and start your own army. You can also attract stuff like, if depending on your alignment, if you're a lawful evil, you might attract a bone devil. If you're chaotic evil, you could attract a unit of ogre infantry. And if that stuff doesn't, or if you're a paladin, you might attract a gold dragon that if you are very nice to, they might let you ride it into battle. And if that stuff sounds cool to you, then I think this book is for you. I think this stuff sounds fantastic. I'm basically making the book that I want, and it's all based on stuff that was in the game decades ago, which I would like to sort of resurrect a little bit and make mechanically relevant. A lot of these things have in-game bonuses and affect not only your character, but also your stronghold. I remember I was working on the Lord of the Rings role-playing game. This was, oh gosh, almost 20 years ago. And one of the authors wrote a really interesting and well-written, I thought compelling essay, essentially, on the different virtues in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And after I was reading it, I was like, this is great. What do these virtues get me? And he was like, blank, blank. And I was like, yeah, if I pick one of these virtues, I sort of assumed that these were his version of like alignment in Lord of the Rings. And he just was like, no, they're just neat. Just read them and think about them when you make your character. And I was like, oh, I felt a little bit let down. So in this system, when you roll and get a tailor, for instance, it's not just neat to have a tailor. It actually tells you, and we'll talk about this in the Artisan Follower video that we're going to do before the Kickstarter is over, a tailor actually does something mechanically useful for you. And it's just neat for me as a player to look at the different charts and imagine what my character might get when they found a stronghold. This video, therefore, is just going to be a high level. We're going to dig down in other videos about how the different kinds of followers work, but I don't want to overload people. I want to make sure these updates are relatively short. So we're just going to talk at a high level about how follower charts work in general, and specifically how the example that I put online, the Paladin follower chart that you can download in the doobly-doo, works. You can read along if you want. The first thing you're going to notice is it is a percentile chart. I love percentile charts. It's something that my favorite magic item for a long time when I first started playing was the Wand of Wonder, which is basically the wand of like 50 random things that could happen, including good things like fireballs and lightning bolts. But also there was a percentage chance that you would cause a fish to rain in a 30-foot circle surrounding you. There are no raining fish in the follower chart, you'll be happy to know. But like those charts, the assumption is that rolling higher is better. If you roll high enough on these charts, you can get a special ally. But unlike those charts, there's no bad results. There's no booby prize here. It used to be that you might roll and you'd get, 2d6 tailors and their family show up, but there was no indication of why you would ever want those things. And so these rules make sure that there is some obvious mechanical benefit to all of these things. And some of those benefits are, some of them might be in combat. Some of them are during negotiations when you're making certain skill tests, and some of them just make your stronghold better or make parts of it cheaper to buy. One thing I want to clear up before we start is that some people who downloaded the example Paladin chart, which you can look at below, they read it and it looked to them as though paladins are automatically lawful good in the system, and that is not true. Your follower chart is a combination of your class. Most of it, like the first 90%, are followers you can attract because of your class, and then the top 10 or so percent is based on your alignment. So you could very easily have a lawful evil paladin that can attract, lots of units, lots of military units, because paladins are good at doing that, but also could attract a bone devil follower because that's part of being evil. And it also means that there's many different combinations. I don't know how many, like 9 classes, I think, and 9 alignments. So that's whatever 9 to the power of 9 is, different unique combinations of follower charts. Each different class attracts different kinds of followers at different rates. For instance, the Paladin, it was a good example here, and the Fighter have a greater chance of attracting military units. I think the Paladin, the first 20% of their chart is military units. And this is also something that, in fact, let me show off the Excel sheet that I used to build this. This is just one part of the sheet, by the way. It's quite complex. And then once I was done doing all the math to figure out how all the different classes and alignments would attract followers of different categories, I then went in and hand tweaked them to make sure that not only did they make mathematical sense, they also met all of my expectations. So I mentioned that the first 20% of a Paladin follower chart are units. What does that mean? There's going to be a whole video we'll do on the basic version of my warfare rules that these units use. Also, just remember, it's cool to say that a unit of cavalry, a unit of elite heavy cavalry show up, and to give them a name and give them a background. That, to a certain extent, that is a reward in and of itself. These rules were still fun to use back when they were purely narrative. I have done a lot of work to make sure they now have mechanical benefits, but it's always cool for a player to be like, I've got an army. It might be a small army, but that doesn't mean they can't do stuff with it. I think Paladins have among the best and heaviest units they can attract in the game. When you look at the description of a military unit, it's got 3 things that define it, really 4 things that define it. We'll talk about the 4th one. It's sort of missing from the chart, but they are the training, the gear, and the type. So for instance, a Paladin can attract a unit of veteran elite infantry. Veteran means they're actually quite well trained and have seen a lot of action. That's important. And all these things affect the stats of the unit, which we'll get to when we talk about the warfare rules in an upcoming video before the end of the Kickstarter. And then how heavy is their gear and armor? And then what type? Are they infantry? Are they cavalry? There's another type. There's aerial units and there's also ranged units, but I think we just call those archers, even though they don't always have to be archers. They could be javelin throwers or something like that. And I might come up with a better term for that. But right now, people understand that archers are ranged units. The 4th missing stat for your unit is what species they are. You know, are they human infantry, or are they maybe elf or dwarf or hobgoblin infantry, or even their stats for lizard man infantry and undead? And they all affect the stats of your unit differently. But there's what's called an attitude table. And there's an example one in the book, but you could build your own. And that is which different species can recruit which different types, other species of units, and at what cost. For instance, it is assumed that whatever your species is, it doesn't cost you any extra to recruit units of that species. So if you roll on this chart and you're a human paladin and you roll and you get seasoned light infantry, it's for nothing, they can be human. And then based on the alliances you've made in the game and the role playing that you've done and the campaign that your dungeon master is running, you might also, without any extra cost, be able to make those units dwarves or elves. This dovetails into one of the other types of followers you can get, which is ambassadors. Ambassadors are not only the idea being that you have founded a stronghold and you're taking over a province and making it your own, and that sends a signal across the countryside. And there are other factions in the world that are really interested in what you're doing and want to help, and so they will send an ambassador over. And ambassadors are based on species, but you could easily translate these into, I don't know what is going on in your campaign, for instance. So it should be relatively straightforward, and there will be language in the book for this to translate these species, elf, dwarf, orc, into nations. For instance, what does it mean to have a dragonborn ambassador? That would mean a very different thing, I think, in my campaign than in yours. But ambassadors not only create these great narrative opportunities, having someone from another culture, another nation in your court and getting information from them, feeding them information, but it also allows you to buy that ambassador's species units at a discount. The chart does make the one assumption that you are human. It's very easy to modify the chart. So for instance, if you are playing a human warlock, you have a 4% chance between 71 and 74 of attracting a dragonborn ambassador, which means you can now buy dragonborn units for your stronghold. But what if you are a dragonborn? Doesn't make any sense. You can already buy dragonborn units. So in that instance, you literally just swap that out for human. And anytime you are playing a species that is listed in the ambassador list and you roll that ambassador, you just replace it with human because the list assumes that you are human. By the way, I think warlocks right now are the only, this is all going to get play tested. Warlocks are the only class that can attract a Gnoll ambassador, allowing them to buy Gnoll units. Because the idea is that warlocks make deals with alien powers. And that means that other species that might not be okay with making an alliance with a paladin might think it was quite reasonable to make an alliance with a warlock. We've talked about military units you can get. We've talked about ambassadors. One of the largest sections of every follower chart is the fact that adventuring followers can show up and pledge themselves to you. Of course they can. You are an adventurer and now you are a famous one. So lower level adventurers look up to you and they want the safety of your stronghold, but they also want to pledge service to you. And that allows you to send them out into the world and do stuff. And there's a whole quest system about what kinds of things they can go out and do. And then you roll in a chart to find out what the results are. There are also some experimental rules have to be heavily play tested, which would allow you to take your adventuring followers with you in combat and not be running an entire character sheet, because it basically just reduces them to some very simple stats and abilities. And of course, it's entirely up to you and your dungeon master if you actually want to run several characters at once. You could, and this would be great, by the way, for a solo game, is I'm running my character and I'm running my entourage. I'm running my troop. The adventuring followers use a lot of language I developed on purpose because I wanted to be able to refer narratively to the different archetypes of classes. A curate, for instance, is my term for a knowledge domain cleric. A healer is a life domain cleric. And I just wanted to have narrative terms. Like I used to really like level titles from back in the day. Like a 3rd level paladin had a specific name for being a 3rd level paladin. And I just wanted to be able to refer to these archetypes in a narrative fashion, the way they might be referred to in the world, as opposed to using purely game mechanical terms. It's way more evocative to me to say that you attract a skinwalker as opposed to a Circle of the Moon druid, because Circle of the Moon druid just sounds too jargony to me. It's not the way they would refer to it in the world, I don't think. I mean, they might, it depends on the class, but certainly I think that you wouldn't refer to that character as an old one packed warlock. You would probably call them something like an alienist, and in fact, that is what I do. A troubadour warrior, for instance, is a valorous bard. So that's what you're looking at when you're looking at the list of adventuring followers. You can not only attract a cleric, you can attract a specific kind of cleric, and that to me makes it more fun and more interesting. And there's all sorts of examples of these actual followers, so that when you roll, I want to make sure I've done as much work for you as possible, that when you roll, and if, for instance, you're Paladin, you can attract, I'm looking at the thing right here, you can attract 2d4 third level healers. There are actually going to be examples of those life domain clerics with names and even in some cases dialogue. Again, because I want it to be easy and fun for you to run, so you can just drop these NPCs on your players without having to do any work. Also, I'm a writer, so of course I'm going to throw dialogue in there. I want your NPCs to sound cool. Building a stronghold takes a lot of work, a lot of people working for a long time, including blacksmiths and carpenters and masons, and some of those people are going to pledge service to you when the job is done instead of going home, and that's one of the ways you can attract artisan followers. Artisan followers all have mechanical benefits to them. For instance, I think a tailor gives you a benefit to diplomacy checks that you make if you're in your stronghold or the province that it governs. And that bonus to diplomacy may even last if you leave, but then it starts to tick down. The idea is that a lot of these special abilities that your followers or your stronghold grant you, they eventually require you to, just like taking a rest, they require you to come back to your stronghold to refresh them. We'll have a whole video on artisan followers with examples of exactly what they do that I hope you folks will be interested in, because I love this stuff. I really like the idea that recruiting a bunch of miners, for one thing, that means there's a mine somewhere on your land, and it also, miners do something for you. None of this stuff is purely narrative. Finally, if you roll high enough, you can roll on one or more of your special ally charts. For instance, the Paladin is one of the classes that has more than one chart. They have a special mount chart that's unique to Paladins, and they also have their normal, based on alignment, special ally chart. A lawful good paladin, for instance, the canonical example, if they roll well enough, they might attract a silver dragon, and that silver dragon might let the paladin ride them, in which case it counts as their special mount. But that is, I mean, dragons are intelligent and proud creatures. That is purely, you have to have a very special relationship with your dragon to pull that off. That is purely between you and your dungeon master. A neutral good character, for instance, of any class, remember that your special ally chart is based on your alignment, not based on your class. A neutral good character could attract a cloud giant. What does that mean? It means that the nearby cloud giants approve of what you've done, and they send someone to say, hey, you show promise, we want to help, to a limited extent, right? Your special allies typically are characters, they're NPCs that are of equal or greater power than your character, as opposed to followers who can sort of order around. Special allies you can't really order around, but you can go to them and ask them to help you out with stuff. They often know things that are beyond the ken of your class and level. But also, one of the things I love about special allies is that they're great at saving the player's bacon when the players get in trouble. In my experience, players love it as long as this is used sparingly, and there's advice for this in the book. Players love it when they feel as though they're facing certain doom, they're about to get wiped out, and just then those one character's cloud giant ally shows up and wades into battle and saves their bacon. That makes the player who has that ally feel special. If you had had one of your NPCs show up and do it, it might be somewhat less impactful, but the fact that this is an NPC ally of the player makes a huge difference. There are lots of tiny fun little special charts. For instance, there's a Fae chart that the druid can roll on. There's devils and demons that characters of different evil alignments can roll on. For instance, a lawful evil character could attract a green dragon or a black dragon or a military unit of Dwagar or a fire giant, or then roll on the special demon chart. And that's one of those things, charts within charts, where you're like, you just salivate at the opportunity to roll on these things, and you get to roll on the chart when your stronghold is finished and every time you upgrade it thereafter. And there's other optional rules for you could roll on it every time you level up as a character. That's entirely down to the dungeon master. That's something else, by the way. Your alignment-based special ally chart can have units on it. For instance, if you're chaotic evil, there's a chance you could attract a unit of ogre infantry. That's it, folks. That's the high level of how the follower chart works. And in the days to come, we're going to drill down on some of these things, and we're going to talk about specific examples of how does warfare work. So how do these units work? What are their stats, and what do the stats mean? We're going to talk about your artisanal followers and what does a blacksmith get you, and how does making magic items? That's one of the things they can do. How does that work exactly? These will not be mysteries. By the time the Kickstarter is over, we will have covered all this stuff. If you have any questions, I encourage you to post them in the comments below. I will try to get to all of them. We also have Twitter. I've got my own subreddit. subreddit. There are links to all these things. I do my best to try to get all over the place and answer questions everywhere. We have a Discord. A lot of people get answers in the Discord. Thanks for watching, folks. If you've already backed the Kickstarter, you have my deepest thanks. It is your support. This is the great thing about the democratization of technology. We can cut all the middlemen out, and we can have a direct relationship with the community. It is your support that allows me to make content like this. I spent the day driving around looking at a bunch of really cool offices that we are going to, one of these places we're going to pick to put our stream. And we may do a video before the end of the Kickstarter talking about the upcoming stream, the upcoming campaign that I will be running. The players have already made some interesting decisions, and I know there are some folks that are interested in that. And if you haven't pledged yet, it is my hope that this video gives you some idea what kind of content is in the book, because honestly, I really do want people managing expectations is so important. If people know what kind of book they're going to get, and then they get that book, I think by and large they will be happy. Next video, I think we'll talk about artisan followers, because I think they're pretty cool and I want to show them off. Until then, peace out.